They only begin to crave you when your presence becomes uncertain, when your attention, once familiar and accessible, turns into something rare, measured, and deliberate. Human nature is addicted to contrast, to the tension between what was once given freely and what now must be earned. We crave what steps back, not what leans closer. And in that distance, something invisible happens. Power shifts. You stop orbiting around their validation, and they begin to orbit around your silence. Desire, at its core, is not born from constant closeness. It's born from the quiet absence that makes the imagination work over time. The mind cannot desire what it fully possesses. It only burns for what remains just out of reach. Every form of attraction, emotional, romantic, intellectual, or social, follows this law. Those who understand it never chase. They withdraw strategically. They know that by retreating, they create space for tension, and tension is the secret currency of desire. When you are always there, always responding, always available, you flatten the emotional landscape. You remove the mystery that gives life its pulse. The greatest mistake people make is believing that connection deepens through constant interaction. It doesn't. True connection deepens through reflection, uncertainty, and longing. When you step back, the other person begins to imagine your thoughts, replay your words, and wonder about your emotions. They start to fill the silence with meaning, creating stories that magnify your presence far beyond what reality could. That's the paradox. Distance, when done with intention, makes you larger in their mind than proximity ever could. It turns your absence into a psychological presence. You exist everywhere, in their thoughts, their doubts, their moments of quiet, not because you speak, but because you've stopped speaking. It's not manipulation, it's discipline. You are no longer reacting to emotion, you're commanding it. You are shaping the emotional rhythm between you and the world, and that rhythm always begins with restraint. Most people cannot handle distance because they confuse it with rejection. They think stepping back means losing the bond. But those who master distance understand that it's not about abandoning, it's about repositioning. You move from the space of need to the space of control. You stop proving your worth and start embodying it. And that shift, that calm withdrawal, is what magnetizes attention. Have you ever noticed how someone becomes more attractive the moment they stop trying? That's because effort, when visible, repels. The more you attempt to be liked, the more you signal insecurity. But when you stand still, composed, detached, yet quietly aware, people feel the weight of your presence. It unsettles them. They sense that you don't need their validation to exist, and that realization triggers something ancient and instinctive, the need to pursue what doesn't depend on them. The power of distance lies not in coldness but in contrast. It's the emotional gravity created when you stop overextending, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop being predictable. Consistency may comfort people, but unpredictability makes them feel alive. The uncertainty of your availability awakens a part of them that still believes in the thrill of the unknown. That's why even love, without distance, becomes dull. Without space, there's no mystery. Without mystery, no curiosity. And without curiosity, desire dies. So the wise keep distance not as a weapon, but as a tool, a quiet, invisible mechanism that preserves value. They know that attention is not infinite, and that what is constantly exposed becomes common. So they pull back, not out of fear, but out of understanding. To be desired, you must become slightly out of reach, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. The moment they feel they fully understand you, the spell breaks. They stop observing, stop wondering, stop chasing. Familiarity breeds comfort, but comfort kills magnetism. That's why distance is not merely physical, it's psychological. You can be standing next to someone and still feel distant. It's about what you withhold, what you choose not to reveal, what you allow others to imagine. This selective revelation creates the illusion of depth, but in truth, it's not an illusion at all. It's power. You don't owe the world your transparency. In fact, transparency often serves those who wish to dissect and control you. When they know everything about you, they lose respect for you. When they can predict your reactions, they stop fearing your silence. The mysterious ones, those who move with calm detachment, are always remembered more vividly than those who talk too much. Why? Because mystery forces projection. People project their ideals, their fantasies, their fears onto you. They make you larger than life because you've left enough space for their imagination to work. And in that imagination, you gain power. People begin to see what they want to see, not what you truly are. The more you hold back, the more they fill in. This is not about deception. It's about psychological economy. The wise know that scarcity increases value. You become the emotional equivalent of something rare, not because you pretend, but because you live with intention. You're not everywhere, not with everyone, not always accessible. Your energy is measured, your attention selective. That's how respect is built, not through excess, but through absence. You show that your presence is earned, not guaranteed. In a world that worships exposure, mystery is rebellion. When everyone is shouting, your silence becomes thunder. When everyone is available, your distance becomes irresistible. The truth is, people don't fall in love with you. They fall in love with the feeling they get when they can't quite have you. That tension, that longing, that slight emotional uncertainty, it keeps them alive, alert, and obsessed. The key is balance. Too much distance breeds indifference, but too little breeds boredom. The art lies in knowing when to step back, when to disappear just enough to make them question. It's a silent dance between presence and absence. Every move must feel natural, not calculated. You must withdraw, not to provoke, but to preserve your inner power. To protect your peace from overexposure, the moment you realize that your time, attention, and emotions are a currency, and that not everyone can afford them, you stop chasing validation. You become the validation. And that's when the world starts to chase you. They will call you cold, detached, arrogant. But what they're truly saying is that they can no longer control you. They can no longer read you, predict you, or manipulate you. Your silence has broken the spell of their influence. Distance is clarity in motion. It shows you who truly values your presence and who only valued your compliance. When you step back, you don't lose people. You lose illusions. And in that loss, you gain something greater, peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that your worth no longer depends on someone else's recognition. The kind of power that radiates quietly, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but commands it. Distance teaches emotional independence. It kills desperation, silences noise, and forces others to meet you on higher ground. Most will fail. Only those who sense your depth will adapt. Because distance filters, it separates the curious from the committed, the impulsive from the intentional. It's not cruelty, it's clarity. You no longer hand over your emotional energy like a gift to those who haven't earned it. You conserve it, refine it, and channel it toward what truly matters. The irony is that when you finally stop trying to be desired, that's when you become most desired. Because nothing is more magnetic than someone who moves through life as if they already have everything they need. That self-containment, that calm, centered energy is the ultimate aphrodisiac. People sense it. They feel the gravity of it. They want to be near it, to touch it, to understand it, but they can't. And that impossibility makes it irresistible. You've become what everyone secretly craves, unattainable peace. The kind of peace that cannot be bought, begged, or broken. It's not the distance itself that makes you desired. It's who you become within it. Someone who no longer needs to be understood, validated, or chased. Someone who is enough within their own silence. Someone who, through absence, becomes unforgettable. There is a point where closeness stops being intimacy and becomes suffocation. It happens quietly, without warning. One day, you simply feel that something is off, that what once felt magnetic now feels heavy. That's when you realize that even the most beautiful connection can lose its edge if you stop giving it room to breathe. People confuse attachment with closeness. They think that the more they share, the more they text, the more they stay around, the deeper the bond becomes. But what they're really doing is draining the energy that makes attraction exist in the first place. Every time you make yourself too accessible, you dilute your own presence. You give away the mystery that made you interesting. You turn the sacred into the familiar, the rare into the routine. And once that happens, you can't get it back, unless you step away. Distance resets the dynamic. It reintroduces uncertainty into the relationship. It reawakens curiosity. The same words that went unnoticed before suddenly echo differently in your absence. The same gestures that were taken for granted now become precious memories. The absence rewires the perception of your value. Because people don't see clearly when they have constant access. The human mind is wired to devalue what it can easily reach. It's not malice, it's psychology. Familiarity dulls awareness. When you're always there, people stop looking. When you leave, they start seeing. It's in your absence that they finally notice what your presence provided. The calm, the attention, the energy, the stability. They remember the things you gave freely, but they never truly appreciated. Distance is what reveals meaning. It acts as a mirror, showing others what they refuse to see while blinded by comfort. And this mirror doesn't lie. The ones who genuinely care will seek you. The ones who only consumed you will vanish. That's why distance is not rejection. It's revelation. It exposes reality without you having to say a single word. It sorts the temporary from the timeless. Most people are terrified of distance because they equate silence with loss. They panic when someone withdraws because they never learned to trust time. But the truth is, if something can't survive distance, it wasn't real connection. It was dependency disguised as closeness. The foundation of anything meaningful must be strong enough to withstand silence. The strongest bonds are not the ones constantly reaffirmed through words, but the ones that remain steady even when there's nothing left to say. When you learn to embrace distance, you stop fearing loss. You begin to understand that stepping back doesn't destroy relationships. It refines them. It forces truth to emerge. It teaches patience, which is the highest form of control. Because those who rush to fill the silence always reveal their weakness. They can't stand not being seen, not being heard, not being validated. But those who remain composed within absence project a different kind of power. The kind that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't explain. The kind that makes others wonder what kind of self-mastery lies behind such stillness. You see, distance is not just external, it's internal. It's the emotional gap between reaction and response. When someone pulls away, the untrained mind panics, overthinks, tries to fix. The disciplined mind observes, breathes, and lets things unfold, because it knows that what is meant to return will return without being pulled, and what leaves for good was never aligned with your growth. That's the secret most people miss. Distance is a test of alignment. It reveals who vibrates at your frequency and who was only tuned to your noise. It cleans the emotional space around you so that only what's meant to stay remains. It's the silent filter that keeps your peace pure. And yes, it hurts, especially at first. The silence can feel unbearable when you're used to being constantly seen. You'll want to reach out, to explain, to be understood. But if you endure that discomfort, you'll cross into a new level of emotional freedom. The kind where your validation no longer depends on external reassurance. You stop asking, why don't they reach out? And start asking, why do I need them to? That's where power begins. When you realize that your peace is not a gift others give you, but a discipline you maintain within yourself. Most people destroy attraction by overexposure. They mistake openness for authenticity and end up showing too much. They bleed emotions in places that deserve composure. They turn their vulnerability into a stage act, thinking that being raw will make them more relatable, when in truth, it only makes them more predictable. What's truly attractive is not openness, it's restraint. It's the controlled reveal of your depth, not its constant display. Mystery doesn't mean hiding, it means revealing wisely. You show just enough to intrigue, but not enough to be consumed. You let curiosity build, tension rise, and imagination work in your favor. This is how emotional gravity is created. The world chases what it doesn't fully understand. Once you are fully decoded, the chase ends. That's why people are drawn to the quiet ones. Not because they're cold, but because they're unreadable. They radiate self-possession. They move through life with an inner stillness that can't be faked. They make silence look powerful. And that's what distance really is. A display of composure, a refusal to rush, a statement of self-respect. It says, I'm not afraid to be alone. And nothing is more magnetic than that. because everyone deep down fears solitude. But when they meet someone who doesn't, someone who walks through it with elegance and calm, they feel both intimidated and fascinated. They want to understand what protects that kind of peace. They start to imagine that there must be something profound inside you, something sacred that needs guarding. And in truth there is. It's your inner world, your thoughts, your values, your standards, your boundaries. These are the treasures that distance protects. When you allow everyone to access you emotionally, you expose that inner sanctuary to chaos. But when you cultivate distance, you build walls made of calm, invisible yet indestructible. You no longer react to noise, you respond to substance. That selectivity increases your perceived value because you've become a rare energy, one that cannot be easily reached, bought, or broken. The modern world has made people addicted to constant validation. They mistake exposure for connection, presence for relevance. But when you start to detach from that rhythm, when you slow down your responses, disappear for a while, say less, post less, explain less, you create a vacuum that others can't ignore. They will sense the withdrawal, they will feel it. The energy shift will disturb their emotional equilibrium, and suddenly they'll remember you. They'll wonder what you're doing, who you're with, what you're thinking. That curiosity becomes desire, because desire thrives in uncertainty. The mind is addicted to solving puzzles, and when you become one, you stay unforgettable. But here's the paradox. Distance only works if it's genuine. If your withdrawal comes from manipulation, people feel it. It smells like fear or insecurity. True distance must come from abundance, from already being full within yourself. You step back not to provoke, but because you no longer need to prove. That difference changes everything. When your silence is rooted in peace, it's powerful. When it's rooted in fear, it's just noise in disguise. The world can sense which one you're living. That's why you must cultivate inner wholeness before mastering outer distance. You can't fake calm. You can't imitate self-sufficiency. It has to be built through solitude, self-reflection, and self-discipline. Only then does your absence speak louder than any performance ever could. The ones who used to take you lightly will suddenly feel the weight of your silence. They'll realize that your presence was not ordinary, but grounding. They'll come to understand, too late, that your distance was not punishment, it was protection. And those who recognize it in time will approach with more care, more respect, more presence. Because distance doesn't just teach others how to value you, it teaches you how to value yourself. You stop begging for attention and start selecting it. You stop explaining yourself and start observing who actually understands your silence. And that is when power becomes effortless. It no longer depends on who desires you. It depends on who deserves to. The world trains you to believe that closeness is the highest form of affection, that the proof of love is constant attention, that to be desired you must always be available. But what the world doesn't teach you is that availability kills mystery, and mystery is the oxygen of desire. When you are always present, you become predictable. When you are predictable, you become invisible. There's nothing new to discover, no tension to resolve, no curiosity to explore. You become part of the background noise of someone's life, comfortable, safe, and easily forgotten. But when you step away, when you create distance, not as an act of defiance, but as an act of awareness, everything changes. You disrupt the pattern. You interrupt the emotional rhythm they've grown used to. Suddenly, your silence becomes louder than your presence ever was. The mind starts to wander, asking questions it didn't care to ask before. Where did you go? What are you thinking? Have you moved on? Are you happy without me? That's the moment you reclaim psychological power. You shift from being the one who seeks attention to being the one who defines its rhythm. You're no longer dancing to someone else's tempo. You've set your own. And that shift doesn't just alter relationships, it rewires your entire perception of worth. Because distance, when understood, becomes a language. It says everything that words cannot. It communicates boundaries without confrontation, respect without demand, value without explanation. The ones who understand that language will rise to meet you. The rest will fade quietly into the noise of their own confusion. That's the power of being both calm and distant. You stop chasing people and start attracting reflection. Those who encounter your distance are forced to face themselves. They begin to feel the contrast between your composure and their chaos, your silence and their noise, your self-control and their dependency. Some will resent it, others will admire it, but all will feel it, because distance in its truest form is energy management. You're no longer pouring your emotions into every interaction, trying to be understood or validated. You're conserving your energy for what's worthy. You're no longer performing availability to keep peace. You're creating silence to protect peace. And in that stillness, something remarkable happens. You begin to hear yourself again. You start noticing what drains you, who disturbs your focus, what situations pull you into unnecessary tension. You see the invisible patterns of emotional noise that used to control you, and as you withdraw from them, you become lighter. That's the irony of distance. It feels heavy at first because it detaches you from what was familiar, but it eventually frees you from what was toxic. The weight you feel is not loss, it's detox. It's your energy recalibrating to its rightful place. Most people fear this phase because it comes with silence, and silence exposes truth. When there's no one left to distract you, you face the reality of your own emptiness, your own dependency, your own need for constant reassurance. That's why most people keep chasing noise, not because they want connection, but because they're terrified of self-awareness. But when you endure that silence, when you sit through the discomfort without running back to what hurt you, you evolve. You begin to crave peace more than attention. You start to value calm more than drama. You realize that distance wasn't just a way to gain power over others, it was the path to mastering yourself. That's when you become dangerous in the most beautiful way, emotionally untouchable. The kind of person who can love deeply but never desperately, who can care sincerely but never obsessively, who can connect authentically without losing identity. That balance, the ability to be fully present yet detached, is what separates the powerful from the dependent. Because detachment isn't indifference, it's control. It's the ability to stay centered while the world tries to pull you off balance. It's standing still while others spin in emotional chaos. You don't withdraw because you're afraid of love. You withdraw because you refuse to lose yourself in it. The truth is, distance and intimacy are not opposites. They are partners. Without distance, intimacy suffocates. Without intimacy, distance isolates. The art is knowing when to merge and when to separate, when to reveal and when to disappear. People who master this art become magnetic, not because they play games, but because they embody equilibrium. They give enough to be felt but hold back enough to be respected. Their energy feels rare because it is disciplined. Their love feels valuable because it is measured. They know that unfiltered access leads to emotional inflation. And like any currency, the more accessible something is, the less valuable it becomes. That's why distance is not cruelty. It's emotional economics. You can't expect others to value what you oversupply. You have to create scarcity through self-respect. That's when people start to see your worth, not because it changed, but because your boundaries forced them to look. There's something profoundly unsettling about someone who doesn't chase, who doesn't explain, who doesn't justify. It forces people to confront the uncomfortable truth that they might have taken something sacred for granted. It makes them feel small, unsure, unworthy. And in that space of uncertainty, desire grows. The more they wonder, the more they remember. The more they remember, the more they idealize. You become not just a person, but an experience they can't replicate. That's the silent beauty of distance. It transforms memory into longing. But the secret is to maintain dignity within it. Distance loses its power when it turns into bitterness or passive aggression. True distance is graceful. It doesn't shout. It doesn't seek revenge. It doesn't broadcast absence. It simply exists, calm, elegant, unbothered. That kind of energy cannot be ignored because it's rooted in truth, not ego. It's the embodiment of self-assurance. When people sense that your silence is not a tactic but a state of being, they're drawn to it, because everyone secretly wants that kind of control, the ability to detach without losing warmth, to be calm without being cold, to walk away without resentment. That's what makes you unforgettable. People remember the ones who stayed composed when others would have crumbled. They remember the stillness that made them question their own noise. They remember how your absence made them feel the weight of their own instability. That's what distance does. It reflects. It shows people who they are when you're no longer cushioning their chaos. And in that reflection, they start to miss you. Not just your presence, but your steadiness. You become a mirror of what they wish they were, grounded, whole, complete. That's the ultimate attraction. Not beauty, not charm, but inner solidity. The energy of someone who could have begged but didn't, who could have argued but stayed silent, who could have chased but walked away. That restraint is rare, it's addictive, it's unforgettable, and the more you live by it, the more powerful your presence becomes, even in your absence. Because power doesn't always roar, sometimes it simply withdraws. It steps back, watches, and lets others reveal themselves. That's the advantage of distance. It makes truth visible without confrontation. It forces everyone around you to show their intentions. Those who panic at your silence were feeding on your energy. Those who respect it are aligned with your strength. Either way, you win. Because distance clarifies everything. And once you've seen the truth through the lens of absence, you can never unsee it. You start to operate differently. You stop over-explaining. You stop justifying. You stop performing for people who don't understand your value. Instead, you embody it, quietly, consistently, unshakably. And in that embodiment, you become desired not for what you give, but for what you withhold. You become the stillness everyone else craves but cannot sustain. There comes a point when you realize that being understood is not the same as being valued. Some people will understand your words, your feelings, your intentions, yet still fail to appreciate their weight. It's because what is easily seen is rarely respected. And that's why distance becomes necessary. It restores sacredness to what's been taken for granted. When you pull away, you're not punishing anyone. You're simply re-establishing the natural hierarchy of energy, showing that what is rare must remain rare. The problem with constant availability is that it breeds emotional laziness. When people know they can have you at any time, they stop earning you. They stop listening deeply, speaking carefully, or acting with intention. They start showing up half-present, half-interested, half-alive. That's not love. That's convenience. But when you disappear, when your silence becomes their new reality, everything changes. Suddenly they remember how much your presence structured their days. The small things, your tone, your calm, your insight, become magnified. The void you leave behind forces them to confront how much they relied on your energy to stabilize theirs. They begin to miss not just you, but who they were when you were around, and that's when they start to desire you again. Not because you've changed, but because your absence has reawakened their awareness. Distance triggers memory, and memory fuels desire. But it's not about playing games. It's about allowing reality to correct imbalance. People can only recognize value in contrast. Without distance, there is no contrast, only routine. And routine kills emotional voltage. To be desired, you must be felt as both presence and absence, like the breath that gives life, but also the pause between breaths that gives it rhythm. When you master that rhythm, you control the entire emotional dynamic. You decide when to engage, when to retreat, when to let silence speak for you. The untrained mind interprets silence as disinterest, but the wise understand it as self-possession. Your distance says, I am whole within myself. I don't need your attention to confirm my worth. That statement, spoken without words, is magnetic. Because in a world of neediness, self-sufficiency is rare. It intimidates those who live off validation. It inspires those who seek it within themselves. Either way, it makes you unforgettable. But let's go deeper. Distance is not merely a strategy of attraction, it's an act of purification. When you step away, you cleanse your emotional field. You release the noise of external expectations and return to your natural vibration. You remember what your silence feels like before it was filled by other people's opinions. You reconnect with your instincts, that quiet knowing that gets drowned by constant interaction. In solitude, your perception sharpens. You start to see patterns in behavior, cycles in emotion, traps in your own attachment. You begin to understand that not everyone deserves access to your peace. And that understanding changes everything. You stop explaining your silence to people who can't handle it. You stop overcompensating for those who never valued your presence. You stop leaking your energy into conversations that go nowhere. Distance becomes your filter, the quiet boundary that separates genuine connection from emotional consumption. Because here's the truth, not everyone wants to know you. Some just want to use you as a mirror for their emptiness. They feed on your warmth to avoid confronting their own coldness. They love your light, but not your solitude. That's why they panic when you pull away, because your distance forces them to face the darkness they've been hiding from. It's not you they miss, it's the distraction you provided. And when you understand that, their absence no longer hurts. It liberates you. You stop chasing ghosts of affection and start attracting those who can meet your silence with their own. The rare ones, those who understand that stillness is not indifference, will match your rhythm. They'll respect your space, honor your quiet, and meet you halfway. With them, distance won't feel like loss. It will feel like balance. Because the right people don't panic when you disappear. They prepare for your return. They trust your silence because they know it's built on peace, not pride. They understand that your distance isn't a wall, but a bridge that ensures connection remains sacred. That's the essence of mature love: presence without possession, closeness without control. The immature demand constant reassurance because they live in fear of being forgotten. The mature understand that true connection can survive the silence between words. They don't need to be reminded, they simply remember. This is the paradox of power. The more you distance yourself from needing love, the more love seeks you, because the energy of non-attachment is irresistible. It signals inner abundance, not scarcity. It says, I am already whole, and people can feel it, even if they can't explain it. They sense that your attention is a privilege, not a right, that your presence is not something they can demand, but something they must deserve. And that realization changes how they move around you. They lower their tone, choose their words, respect your time. You don't need to ask for respect. Your silence commands it. Every moment you hold back, you amplify your value. Every time you walk away gracefully, you remind the world that peace is your priority. That's what makes your distance magnetic. It's not rooted in arrogance, but in alignment. You no longer go where your energy isn't reciprocated. You no longer explain your boundaries. You no longer fear losing people who never truly saw you. You've accepted that sometimes being desired means being unseen for a while. It means letting the space between you and others do the speaking. It means trusting that what's meant to stay will find its way back when the silence has done its work. Because silence always works. It reveals truth faster than confrontation. It exposes loyalty without tests. It restores balance without effort. Those who misread it as indifference will drift away, and that's a gift. Those who see it as strength will draw closer, and that's alignment. In this way, distance becomes your greatest teacher. It teaches patience, restraint, and emotional discipline. It teaches you that power doesn't come from control, but from composure. That desire doesn't come from constant presence, but from meaningful absence. That love, when real, doesn't collapse under silence. It deepens within it. Once you internalize this, your entire energy changes. You no longer rush to fill the gaps in conversation. You no longer fear pauses. You let people wonder. You let them miss you. You let them earn the right to reach you. And in doing so, you become something rare, not just desired, but respected. Because respect is born from distance, and desire is born from respect. You stop trying to be understood and start being felt. Your calm becomes their curiosity. Your silence becomes their obsession. And in the quiet between interactions, your name begins to echo louder than words ever could. Distance is not about disappearing. It's about transforming. It's the invisible process where need turns into power, where attachment turns into clarity, where emotion matures into composure. To master distance is to master the art of presence, because only those who know how to leave can return with greater strength. The ones who cannot detach cannot truly connect. They confuse attachment with depth, intensity with love, and control with care. But those who understand the subtle power of distance know that the less they force, the more they attract. When you pull back with purpose, when you allow absence to breathe instead of begging for attention, you become a mirror of inner sufficiency. You show that you don't seek energy. You generate it. And in a world starving for validation, that kind of energy becomes irresistible. The reason distance makes you desired is simple. It awakens emotional contrast. It makes others feel the space between what they had and what they lost. That contrast activates longing. People begin to romanticize your silence, to imagine that you've grown, evolved, moved on. They sense a change they can't define. And that uncertainty keeps them tethered to your memory. You become not just a person, but an experience that continues to live in their mind. Your name becomes a symbol of control, your silence a reminder of what composure feels like. That's how legends are born, not from noise but from the quiet confidence of those who know when to walk away. The ones who never master distance spend their lives begging for clarity from those who thrive on confusion. They chase validation from people who are allergic to stability. They keep showing up where their energy is not valued, mistaking persistence for loyalty. But the truth is, loyalty without reciprocation is self-betrayal. Distance is how you end that betrayal. It's how you teach the world that your peace is not negotiable. You begin to realize that you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. When you finally understand that, the need to explain yourself disappears. You no longer crave closure. You no longer justify your silence. You simply let people experience what life feels like without your presence. That's the most elegant form of truth. Not words, but absence. Because nothing reveals importance like removal. The ones who are genuine will seek to rebuild. The ones who are convenient will fade quietly into irrelevance. Either way, you win. Distance restores emotional balance to relationships that were built on uneven foundations. It teaches others that access to you is not a guarantee, but a privilege, and privileges must be earned, not assumed. When you hold that standard long enough, your entire aura changes. You stop feeling anxious about being forgotten because you understand something deeper. The people who truly see your worth could never forget you, even in silence. They might not say it, but they'll feel it. In the stillness of their routine, in the quiet moments before sleep, they'll sense the absence of your energy, the stability you provided, the calm you carried, the gravity you brought into their chaos. And that realization doesn't fade. It deepens. It turns memory into reverence. That's the alchemy of distance. It transforms loss into longing, longing into reflection, and reflection into respect. But to reach that point, you must first become comfortable being misunderstood. You must accept that people will call your silence pride, your distance coldness, your restraint indifference. Let them. Only those trapped in dependency misinterpret detachment as arrogance. Those who have found peace will recognize it instantly, because they've walked that same road. They've learned that emotional control isn't about suppression, but about sovereignty. They'll see that your distance isn't a rejection of love, but a declaration of self-worth. You're not withholding affection, you're protecting alignment. You refuse to give energy to those who haven't learned how to hold it. That's not cruelty, it's precision. And precision is the highest form of emotional intelligence. It means you no longer react to everything that moves. You conserve your fire for what deserves it. You stop scattering your attention and start channeling it. That focus makes your presence intoxicating when you choose to reveal it. Because it's no longer casual, it's deliberate. Every word carries weight. Every glance carries intent. People sense that when you give your energy, it's not random. It's sacred. And what is sacred always becomes desired. That's why those who've experienced your presence once never forget it. They might not see you again, but the memory of your calm lingers. They remember how different they felt around you, how grounded, how alive, how aware. They'll look for that energy in others, but they won't find it. Because peace that comes from power cannot be replicated by those who seek it through chaos. Your distance becomes a silent standard. It sets the bar for how others perceive strength, presence, and grace. You've become not just a person to them, but a reference point, the one who showed them what balance looks like. And the irony is you did it by doing less, by saying less, by being less available. The world teaches that attention must be loud, but the truth is, attention follows silence. The quieter you become, the more people lean in to hear you. The less you reveal, the more they imagine, and imagination is the birthplace of desire. That's why those who live loudly are forgotten quickly, while those who move quietly remain eternal. Because mystery doesn't fade, it multiplies. The distance that once felt empty becomes the stage on which memory performs, and in that performance, you live on in their mind, not as you are, but as they remember you. That's the power of strategic absence. It allows others to see you not through your words, but through their own reflection. Every person you leave behind carries a different version of you, one shaped by their own longing, their own guilt, their own admiration. You no longer need to prove your worth. They do it for you. That's the ultimate mastery, when your silence becomes their narrative, when your absence does the speaking, when your distance becomes the most unforgettable presence they've ever felt. But this power demands purity of intention. You can't fake distance to manipulate emotion. It only works when it comes from truth, from having outgrown the need to be seen, from having found peace in solitude. The kind of distance that makes you desired is not performative. It's natural. It flows from a heart that has learned that not every connection deserves continuation, from a mind that knows when to hold and when to release, from a soul that no longer confuses attention with affection. Once you reach that point, distance stops being a tactic and becomes your way of being. You live slower, you speak less, you observe more. You no longer crave closure from others because you've given it to yourself. You walk through life lightly, not detached from emotion, but free from dependency. And that freedom is magnetic. It radiates through silence, it moves through absence, it commands through calm. You've become the embodiment of peace in a world addicted to noise. And that peace, that distance, becomes what everyone secretly desires. Because in the end, people don't want to possess you. They want to become like you. They want the stillness that you found in separation. They want the strength that comes from needing nothing. That is the secret truth most never learn. The distance that makes you desired is not about others missing you. It's about you no longer missing yourself. You've come home to your own presence, and now the world is drawn to the same light you once sought outside. Distance has made you magnetic because it has made you whole. And that is the paradox of power. Once you stop chasing it, it starts to follow you. Once you stop speaking, people start listening. Once you stop needing to be desired, you become unforgettable. Silence isn't absence, it's evolution. It's the quiet glow of someone who finally understands that being desired is not the goal, being at peace is. And that peace, when mastered, is what makes the world turn to find you. Subscribe, because real power doesn't shout, it whispers.